All right, good morning. Good morning. My name is Eli Lipman. I use he, they pronouns. I'm the executive director for Move LA. We are a transportation, affordable housing, and clean air advocacy organization, best known for our work passing big ballot measures, five of them, in fact, that now raise $4 billion per year in LA County for public infrastructure, everything from our incredible transportation system. And you may have seen that the big announcement that the LAX airport station will open on June 6th. We're also going to see the rail to rail project in South LA, a rails to trails project open on May 17th. So we got a lot of big stuff coming. And then we've also been working over the last couple of years to make sure that we fund and build affordable housing, protect tenants so that we prevent homelessness, and also so that we ensure that everyone has a home. And all of these topics are going to be up for discussion in just a couple of weeks. And this conversation today is really to get people excited and to tee up that conversation. So I hope you are all going to join us on May 16th for our Move LA Policy Conference and Community Conversation. We're going to have 300 plus people from business, from the labor community, from government, from advocacy. Come to this event. We've got some incredible keynote speakers, including the chair of the Board of Supervisors, Catherine Barger, has been leading efforts on fire recovery, the secretary for transportation, Tokes Omashakin, the head of the LA and Orange County Building and Construction Trades, Ernesto Medrano, plus a ton of other speakers, including, boy, we've got the mayor of Long Beach who's going to be speaking as well. We've got the new chief of staff for California High Speed Rail, Mark Tollefson. It's going to be a really, lots of CEOs, lots of labor leaders. It's going to be a really incredible experience. It's going to be at the Sheridan Grand, which we're really excited to do for the first time. It's right on top of the block, which, if anybody rides transit like me, you will know is on top of 7th and Metro. So you can literally just walk out of 7th and Metro. There's actually really great bike parking as well for our cyclists. So we're really excited to be doing it at that location. So that's 12:30. We'll start with a nice lunch, do some fun workshops, do some big plenaries. We got some big ideas that we'll be talking about today, and then finish it off because it's Friday afternoon with some drinks and hors d'oeuvres or canapes. Everybody loves that.
I'm so glad you got to that part.
You were waiting for that part, right? Yeah, and so today's program and our conference is made possible by some of our incredible sponsors, who we can't recognize them all here, but in particular, I want to recognize IBW Local 11 and Nika Los Angeles, the Marisla Foundation, People for Bikes, and the Tides Foundation and the Durfee Foundation as our diamond sponsors. We also have the Transit Center, Pacific Environment, and United Way of Greater Los Angeles as our platinum sponsors and our foundation sponsors. And then our gold sponsors this year include Air Products, the Ironworkers, the LA Care Health Plan, Los Angeles Orange County Building and Construction Trades Council, the State Building and Construction Trades Council, and Yuval Bar Zemer. And just we also are welcoming some new silver sponsors this year, including ARUP, Hayden AI, the Operating Engineers, Local 12, the Painters Union for Los Angeles, the Laborers Local 300, and Waymo. So that makes all of this possible. It makes all the staff possible. It makes the Zoom room possible. It makes the conference possible. So we really appreciate and thank all of our sponsors. So please register for our conference. The link is in the chat. And we just published it actually this morning. So you guys, whoever is attending today gets to see the full conference agenda in the wild, out there in your inboxes. We'll be sending it out soon so you can see all the great speakers that we've lined up. All right. I've spoken enough. I'm going to hand it over now to my colleague, my mentor, Denny Zane, founder of Move LA, and our policy director, who is going to kind of walk us through today's agenda and our panel, and we'll introduce our panelists after Denny presents or sort of frames our conversation for today. All right, Denny, go for it.
Hey, Eli, thank you very much. It's a pleasure to be here. I think I want to introduce the panelists first so people can recognize who we have up here on our screen.
Yeah, sure.
And thank them for their participation. We were
I,
looking high and low for experts on the issues we're going to be discussing today, which have a lot to do with achieving clean air, which we've longed for in Los Angeles for a long time, but also taking on the mission of trying to actually abate climate change, not just adapt to it, but to actually abate it. And we'll get into that in our PowerPoint, but these are our speakers. First, I want to introduce Ashkan Naziri, who is, can you wave, Ashkan, when I call your name so people know who you are? Ashkan is the Assistant Director of Power System Planning Division at LADWP. Then we have Min Lee, who's the General Manager for Energy and Environmental Services at LA County, Internal Services. Then we have Michelle Kinman, who's actually just down the hall from where we are right here at the LA Clean Tech Incubator. And she's the Senior Vice President of Market Transformation for the LA Clean Tech Incubator. And then we have Joel Levin, who is Executive Director for Plug In America. And so I'm assuming everybody can see this PowerPoint here, and we're going to move forward with this PowerPoint. I'm going to have to tell Monica to advance the PowerPoint. I'm going to give a little setup program here. I'll try to go through it quickly so that the audience knows what we're here to talk about, and our panelists are sort of queued up contextually. All right, so we know this is LA County, and we all know that LA County really is the center of the emissions challenge. We've long had the worst air pollution in America, at some occasions the worst in the world, but it also turns out we're the center of solutions because the whole electric vehicle program is a California program that was really inspired by the need for clean air in LA. So we think we have got a role to play at the center of solutions. Okay, and we're here to look for advice. Our advice is, what we're looking for, we think that because we have limits, federal limits on our regulatory authority, international limits, that we really have to find a strategy that involves investment of serious money in the solutions to clean air and climate health. And that's what we're here to talk about. We want to talk about things like how do we find and how do we use a revenue source of about $1 billion a year. And we think there are several out there, including the cap and trade program, including potentially a ballot measure. We've done those before, so we're not intimidated by that idea. Move forward. All right, so we also, key observations, progress in air pollution has slowed, and it's slowed in large part. We've made great progress on the light duty side. We made great progress with EVs rolling out. We're not done yet, but our progress on the diesel emissions, the trucking, the goods movement has really not been keeping pace, and it's our big challenge. And if we are able to really succeed in this challenge, there is a chance that we could actually abate climate change. It's not the only challenge, but it's a central challenge. Go forward. Okay, we also know that climate change is accelerating. We've already passed the 1.5 degrees centigrade over pre-industrial levels that had been agreed to internationally as a kind of target. As a consequence, our droughts are worse, our wildfires, as we've seen recently, have been worse, windstorms are worse, and flooding is worse. It's really, things seem to be escalating globally, but also locally. We think we have to lead, especially since We were leading. California has been the leader in this area before. LA has been a leader in this area. During the Biden administration, we had a partner, but now we think in Washington we have apparently a motivated opponent. And so we have to go back to our own tools. We want to think this through, and we think the place to start is, where do our emissions come from? What are our biggest sources? And I don't expect you all to read this chart, but this chart is the where all the emissions for nitrous oxides come from. NOx is one of the precursors to ozone. It's the key to air quality planning. And if you look at this chart and add it all up, you see about 90% of the NOx comes from power generation and transportation, both light duty and heavy duty. And then if you look at the chart for greenhouse gas emissions, a striking discovery that the same three sources are about 60% of our greenhouse gas emissions. So if we take on those same three sources aggressively and really move toward renewable power and zero emission transportation, we not only can really take care of our air pollution, we go a long way to take care of our climate challenge. Three big sources, as I mentioned: power generation, light duty vehicles, gasoline, and then heavy duty trucks, especially long haul trucks, but also on-road and off-road vehicles are the three big categories. So to restore clean air and climate health, our goal should be 100% zero emission renewable power. We're maybe halfway there, some people say, and 100% zero emission transportation. We've made a long strides on the light duty side, but we've got a lot to do on the heavy duty side. But hey, I need to mention short-lived climate pollutants, a kind of different category of pollutants. We'll get into that a bit, but they're a separate and additional challenge. We know that our economy needs electric power, and we need more power to avoid brownouts, just as we are. But if we're going to have a zero emission transportation system, we will see that we need more power, and all of that needs to be renewable so that we avoid emissions from the power, right? So there is a kind of interactive dynamic here between power and the other solutions. The good news on the transportation sector is actually we have, or also the power sector, we have the technologies. Now, 10 years, 15 years ago, if we were having this discussion, we'd be saying to ourselves, oh my God, how are we ever going to get rid of emissions from light duty cars? There's just a few electric cars out there, but will they ever make it? And people worried whether the wind and solar could ever be commercial and productive enough. But really, they worried also about heavy duty trucks. Are they ever going to have zero emission trucks? A couple of candidates: battery powered trucks and hydrogen fuel cell trucks. But we're here to say we think that this technological challenge of the vehicle side is no longer the really big challenge. We've mostly met this challenge. There are technologies out there. We got solar, we got wind, we got battery EVs, and we also have heavy duty battery trucks and heavy duty fuel cell trucks, but not many, but they work. So what's the problem really? Insufficient charging infrastructure is a big part of the problem for EVs, as well as cost of the EVs. We've got no hydrogen fueling infrastructure of consequence. Well, we got no electrolytic hydrogen fueling. There is hydrogen out there being produced, but we want zero emission electrolytic green hydrogen, and there's very little of that, none in California that I'm aware of, except maybe some, one-offs in some private operation. I'll make it corrected on that by my panelists. We also know, so can we back up a slide? We have insufficient power for all of that, and we got to solve vehicle affordability. Okay, forward. We think what it comes down to is infrastructure. So the good thing about infrastructure is we know how to do that. That means building stuff. We know how to create renewable power. We got to build more. It's a build program. We know how to create EV charging. We got to build more. We got to make it more readily available, more reliable, and we got to make it and more accessible, more commonplace. We also got to start creating our electrolytic green hydrogen system. We know how to do this. This is not easy itself, rocket science. We know how to do this. We just haven't done it or haven't done it enough. And we also need the hydrogen distribution. So this is a build. Now, we also think we got to think about rebuild, and we'll talk about this in a minute. The recent fires tell us that, climate change impacts are coming on, and there's going to be some rebuilding and adapting that has to happen as well. Vehicles need to be affordable, not just to the affluent, they need to be affordable to common person, to the low-income mom and pop, to low-income people and mom and pop purchasers, business operators, like mom and pop trucking operators. A huge part of the trucking industry are people who own their own truck or two trucks, what we call mom and pop trucking operators. That's huge. We got to make sure that the zero emission technology is affordable to them as well. All right, now I mentioned short-lived climate pollutants. That's principally methane and HFCs, which is used in refrigeration, and then ozone and black carbon. Now, ozone and black carbon, we should recognize that that's also part of the air pollution equation, and the big source of that are the diesel technologies. So one of the reasons why we talk about diesel a lot is because it's not just a carbon program or carbon generator, it is also creating these short-lived climate pollutants, ozone and black carbon at the same time. And also it's a big-time carcinogen. One of the few fuels that have been named on the Prop 65 list for toxic air contaminants. Methane, we all know, that's natural gas. And we use it in our homes, we use it in our business, comes in pipelines, and we use it for cooking and home heating all the time. But it's also generated in landfills, at dairies, and wastewater treatment facilities and the like. And it's a big challenge for us because it's integrated into our life. Next. All right, so of course, we do need to reduce how much we use the existing systems, polluting transportation systems. We have, got to reduce vehicle miles traveled in our cars and trucks. And that's why we also think transit system and active transportation systems are very important. We've done Measure R and Measure M in LA County. That's 2.5 billion a year. That really gives us a head start on all of that. Like Eli said, we're going to be opening the LAX Transit Center in June. And a year later, they'll open the People Mover, and the whole of LA will be able to access LAX by transit. We at Move LA are very proud of that. We regard that as one of our big victories. We also know now that we have to prioritize fire prevention and fire hardening because, climate change has really gone beyond where it was 10 years ago. And so the risks are greater. We have to be prepared. Especially, I think, to ensure that disadvantaged communities don't get a disproportionate share of the burden. One thing about a build, rebuild program is that there's going to be a lot of construction jobs. And, we've got the good fortune in Southern California to have a very, very strong and diverse building trades community, and they're good union jobs with secure incomes and medical care and so on available. And so that opportunity to rebuild our infrastructure here is going to create prosperity for working class people here as well. But we think we have to use other tools. The Greenhouse Gas Reduction Fund, there's 4 or 5 billion a year some of which could be devoted to these kinds of purposes. We will be in that dialogue. We're not limiting ourselves to any single strategy. But we do think that we need to think about whether there is a ballot measure that voters might want to approve. Fortunately, since starting in 2018, voter initiatives no longer require 2/3 vote. They are a majority vote. That means that there is a real way, a real path forward using this tool to raise $1 billion to $2 billion a year, potentially over 30 years to address this problem in LA County. And that's the scale of investment we think we need to think about. So this is not, the way. It is one of the ways, and we're pondering it. We don't expect anybody here to be making any endorsements. We want to make sure we understand things well enough to make choices. This is an illustration of, so can we use the other slide with the bigger version of this? All right, hang on, folks. Little technical mumbo jumbo here. We're going to look at a slide that shows this bigger, get an idea what we're talking about. We call this a straw person for a potential ballot measure. And that means it's a piece of a document that we use for discussion purposes, and it's constantly changing. But it's useful both as a potential for a ballot measure, but it also helps guide our advocacy in the cap and trade discussion or in the state legislature's budget process. Well, it looks like we might not be able to pull that one up. Well, here it is. Okay, so look, if you look at what we're saying here, we think that the foundational investment in all of this is really our renewable power system, because all of the transportation, whether it's battery electric or hydrogen fuel cell, relies upon electricity, and the power system is one of the top three sources of emissions. So really, we have a foundational need for an electrification strategy, and everything depends upon being able to expand our electric power. And then you'll see going down, we think that setting up committing resources to firefighting and fire hardening and other resilience strategies is probably the second. But then right into the whole issue of heavy duty vehicles, diesel powered stuff, then on to the light duty, and then short-lived climate pollutants, and some funding for transit. Those are the goals for us. They're not all in one strategy. They could be in one strategy, could be in a ballot measure strategy. Many of them could be a part of the cap and trade program. But we work for these resources in a variety of ways. Okay. So I think that's kind of at the end of our slideshow to set up this discussion. Although I think I do want to highlight again for everybody that we have a conference on May 16th that will have a major panel of leaders. Instead of 4 people like today, we'll have 14 people. And that's our way of getting both the experts and the constituency leaders together all in one place to see what we need to do. And there we are. These are keynote speakers. Again, look at that date, May 16th. That's Friday the 16th at the Sheraton Grand in LA. Very transit accessible. Maybe the most transit accessible hotel in the region, because lots of transit cross there at 7th and Metro. All right, so let's go to our panelists, and I want to, give each of you first. And Eli, please feel free to jump in. And I know you're in the other room, and you don't get to grab me by the neck if I'm doing something crazy, but you do get to comment and help affect the discussion. So
happy to.
I'm sort of looking for a general overview from folks about whether they think these priorities, we've identified the right priorities if the goal is principally reducing emissions to fight climate change. And Eli, you had something? Okay.
No, no, go for it.
So Michelle, here at Lacey, you working on this stuff in an advocacy role for a good while now. Are we distorting the picture in some way, or do you think we got a decent handle on it?
Yeah, thanks, Denny. Thanks for inviting me to be a part of this conversation. Great set of people on the panel, as well as in your audience. Just looking through, there's so many people in the audience who could be on this panel. So great that you've got all these minds early on in your process of pondering.
So all they had to do was return my call.
Very good. I think, very, very high level, absolutely agree with you in terms of the extremes that the LA area represents in terms of both the problem and the possibility for solutions. And I'm grateful that you all are thinking early about the range of tools that we can utilize to bring more funding to the region. I know we're thinking a lot and working on a GGRF play right now that would dedicate a significant amount of funding to the LA region for zero emissions goods movement in particular. So definitely like to see that focus in your ballot initiative, the straw person of your ballot initiative, the focus particularly around the charging infrastructure side for heavy duty trucks, I think is really, really important. Just one fact on that front, just to give a sense of scale for folks who may not be working intimately on the heavy duty side of the equation. We did a blueprint looking at the 710 corridor alone a couple of years ago and how much charging infrastructure needs to be situated just along that corridor in order to meet the port's goal of getting to 100% zero emission drayage by 2035. And we found that, kind of stage gating that, we would need to have 28 depots for charging by 2028, costing about 280 million in total, and then an additional 415 million across at least 42 more facilities by 2035. So these are big dollars. So I really appreciate that you are, kind of thinking big picture on all of this and love that emphasis. The only thing I would maybe add as a starting point on the renewable side of the equation, obviously 100% renewables, I think is a shared goal by everyone here. I would also encourage you to be thinking about some of the tools that are necessary to bridge that nexus between clean power generation and transportation electrification. So thinking about potentially funding things like storage integrated at EV charging systems, EV charging management systems, vehicle to grid technologies, virtual power plants, things of those nature that really I think are more and more important in terms of communication for the grid and for our vehicles. So excited to hear what others have to say.
Yeah, really. Thanks, Michelle. That was great. Exactly the kind of overview and emphasis upon priorities and missing elements that I'd love to hear from panelists. Thank you very much. So Ashkan Naziri, your world is more of the power generation world, am I right?
Power generation, power transmission, and power distribution.
Okay, so we put a lot of emphasis on the power side and the need for, because it all seems to hinge upon having the big renewable power investment sufficiency for all these other purposes. Do we have it right there? Are we overstating that, or what do you think?
So first of all, Danny and Move LA, thank you for setting up this opportunity and this panel, and thank you for inviting me. So we are actually LADWP has been extremely proactive when it comes to transitioning the power system to renewable resources. We understand that it's important to provide the electricity to our city from renewable and carbon-free sources. As I think you're aware, we did a LA 100 study that basically showed different paths of getting to 100%. And as the LA 100 study went on, we wanted to understand a full scale of contributors to pollution, especially in the city. And as you illustrated in your slides, transportation was the biggest offender.
Ashkan, I want to make sure you also have an opportunity to fully comment on what the slideshow said, and not just the power, but the whole range of investment. Do you think we're missing something there? We'll come back to the power, believe me, but I want to make sure all of our speakers have a chance to comment on the overview.
Sure. So based on all the studies we have done, we think transportation is the biggest portion that needs to be tackled, and that 80%, 90% that you mentioned in NOx, and majority of GHG comes from transportation. So yes, that's correct.
Okay, good. So I'm going to come back to you in a minute for more detailed description of LADWP's efforts, which I think will stand up as maybe the most aggressive efforts in the nation, if I'm not mistaken. And I want to come back to you, but I want to give others a chance to do the overview first, and then come back to the specialty.
Sure.
Okay, very good. Thank you. Min Lee.
Hi, good morning. You covered a lot of ground there. And so let me try to focus on a few things and make a few points. One of the things that I think you said, and I want to make sure that we really think about this and put this in perspective. Okay. And there's news out this week, and I think the ports of LA, mentioned that, they're expecting to see a 35% reduction in shipping volume coming in from Asia in a week. Okay, because they can see where ships are leaving ports all over the world, and so they know in advance what's going to hit them, and they're seeing volumes go down. And so I would argue, if your metric is around reducing NOx and SOx and GHG emissions, the administration in Washington DC has done a tremendous job in reducing emissions. An economy that is approaching recession actually is an economy that doesn't emit as much, right? And so if your goal is emissions reductions, then people in DC are doing a great job at that. But so I think we want to sharpen that a little bit and talk about how to decouple an economy that is largely driven by emissions today to an economy that is driven by renewable and less emissions. So let's be sharper in that discussion, because what we see in the California example, and I think just this past week or several weeks ago, it was noted that California is now the fourth largest economy in the world if you treat California as a nation. You look at it from that perspective. We're the fourth largest economy, and we were able to achieve that by somewhat decoupling, right? And so we want to make sure that we decouple our power generation sector as well as our transportation sector from emissions, both GHG as well as NOx and SOx and other criteria pollutants. There are funding sources already available. During the IIJA and the IRA actually passed a lot of funding that became available in LA. The LA region, California, won a lot of these competitive grants, in particular funding that is meant to go to our ports to help decarbonize our ports and the trucking that goes, the goods movement vehicles that move goods out of our ports.
Those are federal sources, right, Min?
Exactly. That's what I'm trying to point to here, as well as the South Coast AQMD winning some large funds that will help the transportation, heavy duty goods movement as well. And so it's important to have those funding sources move as well because those were competitively won. And so those are being held up right now. And I want to see those move because we can make good movement here. But we also need a large ecosystem. We can't do it alone, right? There needs to be the infrastructure, there needs to be obviously the workforce, and there needs to be the vehicles. And so, this transition is not going to be that, it's not going to be that fast. But I'm certainly excited to see us make progress here.
So you think that our emphasis then on the power system and the light duty and the heavy duty transportation systems are the right emphasis?
Well, uh, I'm going to ask the question, what is the goal? Which is why I posed the initial, thought that you got to decouple, right? Decouple the economic activity from emissions, and that's challenging, right? But you got to be clear about what you're trying to achieve. If you're just trying to achieve emissions, we can drive ourselves into recession and do that. But likewise, we can also incur higher costs to society, which drives inflation as well through taxes otherwise. And so, you mentioned measures. And so, if we make it too expensive for people to live here and businesses to survive here, right, then we drive businesses outside of our region, and that makes and housing costs. And so all these things are interrelated. And so we do need to be very careful about where the sources of funding for, how well we make those investments, and what those investments actually achieve.
Okay, so but it sounds like you think the categories of investment are kind of the right priorities if, and I will say that what we're thinking here is that the first goal here is not just adapting and becoming, able to handle more fires or able to handle rising seas and so on, and droughts and what have you. We need to continue to focus on the mission of reducing emissions so that we can actually abate climate change. We shouldn't be giving up.
Totally agree. And you gotta, like, you have to have targeted programs that actually achieve the most impact per dollar spent. Okay. And you can, we can do a lot of things. There's a lot of ways to place investments, right? There's a lot of ways that we can make progress, but what are the ways that we can make the most progress? And so the question is, how do you define what that progress is? Do you define it as GHG emissions, or do you define it as criteria pollutant reduction? Right? If you were to focus purely on GHG emissions, then you would focus primarily on light duty transportation, right? Because that's where gasoline sales, that's the big chunk in that pie chart that you showed. If you were to focus on criteria pollutants, you would certainly focus on heavy duty goods movement. So the question is, what are you trying to focus on?
Well, but heavy duty sector, diesel power sector, also has emissions,
of course,
that are
yes,
short-lived climate pollutant emissions that are not present in gasoline. So diesel, yes, light duty cars are top of the heap when it comes to just carbon dioxide emissions. But if you also add in the emissions, the short-lived climate pollutant emissions of ozone and black carbon, then diesel comes up near the top of the heap as a priority too, don't you think?
Well, maybe Michelle or Joel can answer that question. But when I look at the sheer volume of number of gallons or million gallons of gasoline versus the number of millions of gallons of diesel sold in California, what you'll see is that the gasoline is going to have more GHG, right? So it may be true, and maybe Michelle or Joel can opine in, but like, we got to be very clear about what we're trying to achieve.
All right, so Joel, thank you so much for being here, and frankly for being early, relieving my anxieties about making sure all our panelists are able to be here, that we've done it right. So thank you so much. And Plug in America, tell us, everybody knows what LA County is. A lot of people know what LA Clean Tech Incubator is, I think, maybe. Although, Michelle, maybe we want to give you a chance to explain that more too. But what is Plug in America, Joel?
So we're a national nonprofit organization that advocates for electric vehicles. As it happens, we're based here in Los Angeles, and I'm here in Los Angeles. So we do public education and awareness around EVs and try to promote EVs to consumers, and we also do advocacy work and to promote good government policies that can make it easier for people to get into electric vehicles. And certainly charging is a big challenge. The vehicles are here now. Finally, we have a good selection of electric vehicles, light duty vehicles that are available for purchase. charging is definitely an issue. There was a lot of money coming down the pike from the IRA and the IIJA, and I fear that a lot of it may not make it.
Wait a minute, what's the IRA and the
Sorry,
IIJA?
from the federal government, the Biden administration allocated a lot of money for investment in electric vehicles, and it's a lot of it is now being blocked, and the new administration is doing everything they can to slow down some of those investments, particularly in charging infrastructure, which is really unfortunate. And so I think that a local initiative that can drive investment into charging to try to backfill some of those federal investments that are not going to happen would be really great and really exciting. I mean, Los Angeles it's the center of car culture in this country, for better or worse. It's kind of where it came from. And it was the place where the EV movement, that's sort of the basis for Plug-in America, got started as well. And there's more electric vehicles in LA County than any place else in the country right now. And it's growing steadily, not maybe as fast as I would like, but it's growing. And charging is definitely a concern. I think that I would focus on maybe 3 different areas of charging that are really important. Um, Number one would probably be multifamily dwellings. If you live in a single family home, it's relatively straightforward to, charge in your driveway or in your garage. If you live in an apartment building, it's much more complex, which is what roughly half of people in LA area. Um, and particularly if you don't have parking, if you don't have designated parking. So there's a lot of solutions. There's a lot of ways to do it, but it's trickier than single family homes. So to think about ways to support EV charging with investment with EVs with investment in charging. Number one, I would say, is investing in charging in or near multifamily housing, particularly charging deserts, particularly kind of low, medium, and lower income areas where it's harder to sort that out. Second would be workplace charging. So to be able to put charging infrastructure into large workplaces, government facilities, medical facilities, educational facilities, big workplaces, office complexes, things like that. So for people who cannot charge at home, workplace can be a good alternative for that as well, and really focused in on the employees. I think that's because they have long dwell times. If you're parked at work for 8 hours a day, workplace can be a great opportunity for charging. And then the third area, as has already been mentioned, is medium and heavy duty vehicles. So fleets of trucks, the port, off-road vehicles, things like that. Medium and heavy duty, it's a bigger challenge. It takes some major investments because you're talking about large amounts of power, and it has, as Min was talking about, the co-benefit of all of the clean air benefits. While it's true that people buy a lot more gasoline than diesel, LA has unique problems with air quality, and you get the most bang for the buck for that from focusing on heavy duty. So I think that there's a big logic to focusing on heavy duty, because there's not just climate benefits, but there's kind of quality of life and health benefits as well. So I would certainly focus in on heavy duty and the port and things like that. Um, I would also throw in active transportation as a way to reduce vehicle miles traveled. So one area, for example, Metro has come up with these really great plans for first and last mile strategies to make it easier for people to get to metro stations. And mostly those have not been funded. So they've got these great plans to make it easier to ride your bike or walk to a metro station. But at this point, a lot of those are just plans. So a way to invest in some of those things to make it easier and more pleasant for people to use the metro and get to metro stations would be really exciting. And then bike lanes as well. I think LA has really underinvested in bike lanes. This should be a city of bicycles. I mean, if you look at great cities of Europe and in the East Coast in the last decade, 20 years, they've really invested heavily in kind of bike lanes to make it simple for people to get around. And a lot more can be done in LA. I mean, it's big, it's flat, there's wide open spaces, we've got a good climate. This could be a much easier city to get around on a bicycle and get rid of some VNT in the process. Then I would also, depending how much money we're talking about, I think having some vehicle incentives would be great as well, both for heavy duty because those are some major expenses to support fleet owners or who want to invest in heavy duty. And then for light duty vehicle purchase, maybe focusing in on used vehicle incentives. Some of the utilities now have used vehicle incentives. I could see potentially supporting those programs to push those further. Might be an easy way to do that if you were going to focus on those. So those are
So
maybe
Joel,
some areas that would be great to support.
Joel, thank you very much for that overview. I want to ask my colleague Eli to jump in here. Eli,
Well,
given what we've heard so far, what are your observations or questions?
yeah, for sure. I mean, I think these are all great, and I'll take it sort of from Joel first. I mean, you're absolutely right on the active transportation. That's a great way to, as an alternative, to get people out of their cars. It's relatively less expensive. It has been zero emission since that new technology of the bicycle came out in what was it, the 1850s. And so we've put some money into this. We actually want to double down or even triple down on the state's California e-bike incentive program, which we are partners on because we think that's a great way. And we also have been working really hard through our Festival Trail initiative, which is a different project to create zero emission alignments essentially so that people can bike safely. So we put that investment into the straw person measure, and I think that's really great. Heavy duty, like we have to consider that all of us are consuming more goods and that the amount of things that we're purchasing on places like Amazon and Walmart.com continue to increase. Despite the tariffs, which, may be longer lasting, but, could be shorter. The projections for the amount of goods that will move through our region continues to rise at a steady pace. And so by addressing that, I think that's what it's important. I think it's important to think of the historical context, and I'm thinking of Min's comments, but also David Abel's. We have to remember that during the same period where we've passed multiple ballot measures, Measure R, Measure M, Measure A, sales tax measures, other tax measures as well, we've gone from I think the eighth or 10th economy in the world to the fourth economy in the world. We've gone from 30 or 40 in the world for LA County to now 25th in the world. And so despite these taxation measures, we have seen our economy increase and increase in an incredible pace. In fact, we have to remember the context of when Measure R was passed. Measure R was passed in the depths of our worst recession, in the Great Recession of 2008, and we were still able to get nearly 70% of folks in LA County to vote yes. Why was that the case? Not just because it created an incredible amount of jobs and continues to create an incredible amount of jobs, but for every $1 spent on public transportation, $4 are leverage and are increased your investment in other parts of the business community. And that's why we see, I see some of my friends in in the audience attending here, many of who've gotten multiple contracts to build things here and in the city of LA and the county and Inglewood and many of the other cities. And so we see this multiplier effect with infrastructure, and that's I think what we're talking about. And so I actually think I sort of see it the opposite. I see, if a recession is coming, this is actually caused by, frankly, not us, but by policies at the federal government, which, was also, what was partly to blame for the 2008 crisis and the housing crisis, I see our opportunity to bring invest or fund investment here and keep investment here so that we can actually keep our economy going and actually become the world leader in these technologies. And that is really exciting for us. And we think that that sort of public infusion will actually draw more more private investment here. Denny, what do you agree, or do you think I'm going off the deep end there?
Well, the deep end is exactly where we want to go, isn't it? I mean, we are in need of aggressive strategies. Climate change is coming at us fast. That's what the fires told us, right? And all the loss of life and property that took place both in Palisades, but also Altadena. We should see that as a wake-up call for LA. And so the deep end, yeah, well, that's where all the water is, and we're going to need some of that to help fight those fires. But we also need to have a sort of deep end strategy here that we're gonna try to make a difference in a short period of time. I want to go back to the power question and ask some of our panelists here about how we do it on the power. I mean, I'm at a loss here. I think my dad was a mechanic, so I have a little bit of understanding about how you make cars work and things, but I've got no idea. And I'm sure our audience would love to hear about how do we transform our power generation system to a renewable power system. We've got in the city of LA, we got LADWP. The county has helped to create something called the Clean Air Alliance, right? That's involved in some way with power. And then, of course, Edison in the non-LA parts of the county. But we've got a couple like Burbank and Glendale and Pasadena have their own thing. So in that kind of complex set of institutions, let's imagine we had a boatload of money, which we always, $1 billion a year or so, not all of it for power, but enough for power. What do we do? Who manages that money? What do they do with it? How do they make this work? Ashka, I'm going to you first.
Sure. So you asked a question about generation of power. So I take one step back, and historically, power was generated by sources such as oil, coal, natural gas, and nuclear, and hydro, of course. And about 20 plus years ago, we started divesting from some of the more pollutant, I'm talking about LADWP, more pollutant sources, and start adding more renewable sources such as wind, geothermal, and solar energy. And as we started raising the capacity on those sources, we start divesting from coal. So in 2019, DWP stopped taking coal generation electricity from Navajo. And this year, in about a month or so, IPP in Utah will not generate electricity for LA anymore. And we are continuing to add.
That means for us no more coal power, right? Although that power is still being generated, it's not being used here.
That's a larger discussion, but I think it's going to stop completely. So there will be no coal generation in Utah.
Okay.
So DWP will be basically 0% coal by June, July of this year.
That's a big deal.
It's a huge deal.
It's a huge deal. I mean, considering the campaigns that were launched, more than a decade ago to do that, it's a big deal.
It is a huge deal. Yeah, absolutely. And Eli, you brought that up. Because of that, I'm going to say, if you go to LA100 study, it's a website, la100study.com. There's a full report, chapter 9. Take a look at that. The charts are very clear. The GHG goes from this much to this much just by retiring coal. It is amazing. and NOx. So back to PPA. So we have accelerated onboarding various PPAs, and that's power purchase agreements for solar, for wind, for geothermal. And post LA 100, we will continue to do our analysis to see how we can do this transition in the most affordable and most reliable way. And to answer your question on 1 billion, as of now, based on the recent study and the plan, which is called LA 100 plan, we are expecting a cost of close to $100 billion in the next 10 years if we want to be 100% renewable by 2035. So that's on average, it's about 10 billion, and that's for City of LA and LADWP. Then you mentioned there is Southern California Edison, Glendale Water and Power, Burbank Water and Power, Pasadena, and other munis. So to put this in perspective, going back to the biggest offenders of pollution, we strongly believe that transportation is the best one to address first. You showed between the high heavy-duty diesel truck, off-road equipment, ship and commercial boats, passenger cars, light-duty and medium-duty trucks, they account 80% of NOx. And then if you add aircraft and locomotive, that brings up to 90%. So if we have 1 billion, where do you put that? In the same chart, you show the reclaim, which is power generation, is part of it. And that's account for about 6%. And for LA, again, in LA 100, if you go there, you will see that in basin, and when I say in basin, the power generation in basin accounts for about 1% of NOx. So 90 versus 9. And that's on the NOx for, side. And then on the GHG side, power generation has GHG because most methane is carbon. So again, when you look at transportation versus power generation, you see transportation again wins, unfortunately, in the wrong way by producing the most GHG. So we see our role to provide a clean, reliable, and affordable power so we can unlock different sections of economy, including transportation and building electrification. And because we recognize the importance of that, DWP and the City of LA have goals. So we had goals to install 45,000 charging stations, including 1,000 DC fast charge by 2025. That was an aggressive goal for us. We have surpassed that. And as of March of this year, last month, we have installed 38,000 charging stations. So we are raising the bar again. And now we have a goal of 120,000 charging stations, including 3,000 DC fast charge by 2030. So that's on the charging infrastructure. We are also planning to deploy 2 EV hubs, one in Normandy Plaza and one in Van Nuys Plaza. Again, these are all on the charging side. On the EV side, to basically get rid of the NOx and SOx and GHG emission from the roads, basically. City of LA has a goal of deploying 250,000 light-duty EV by 2025. Again, we are very close to that goal as of March of 2025.
So LADWP then is kind of leading the way in large part, aren't you?
We are.
City of LA on this renewable power agenda and making this electric transportation possible. That's pretty, I mean, but you don't, makes it clear you need funding, and $1 billion ain't enough. But that makes it very clear that that's a fundamental objective here, is to make sure we fund. Now, Eli, did you say that Fran Pavley was in our audience and wanted to ask a question? I don't know if folks in our audience know, I mean, Senator Pavley.
We've got quite a few august and important folks. Let me see if we can allow her to talk. And if she wants to say a few words.
Assemblymember Pavley, Senator Pavley, my assembly member and senator, thank you very much, Fran Pavley, in the legislature was the initiator and driver of the state dialogue on its role in fighting climate change. And I hope we get her on screen here, but you know, she's somebody we all should be saying thank you to.
I don't need to be on screen. I've been reading all morning long. But thank you. I just wanted to let you know I'm on that County Blue Ribbon Commission, and a report comes out the end of this week. It's the preliminary report, with the final report at the end of June. And a lot of what you've been talking about, some of it could be very relevant.
Oh, great. End of June. We look forward to it.
So that's all I wanted to highlight for you.
You know, the chair on
maybe it may be helpful.
Well, I know the chair for that Blue Ribbon Commission is Matt Peterson, and I just saw him walk by.
Yeah,
the
Matt's chair. I'm vice chair, so how bad could that be? But there's actually a lot of like Ben Stapleton, who's executive director of the U.S. Green Building Council, and there's people in insurance, and so it's about 15 of us, and the rest are in different backgrounds. And the water energy side is past a general manager. He's retired, Marty Adams. So people with experience.
Well, Denny, maybe we have a little bit more time before our May conference. Maybe we have somebody from the Blue Ribbon Commission, join our conversation.
Do another Zoom?
Yeah, we should do another Zoom actually after it comes out.
Oh, now we've got another one on May 7th. Everybody in the audience should be looking at their May 7th calendar, because at 10 o'clock on May 7th, we're going to do another one of these, and we'll be blasting out e-blast and giving you a chance to register. But I want to go back to Min Lee here again, because Min, if I'm not mistaken, your responsibilities at the county also involve the county's role in power generation and power utilization, maybe not as directly as somebody working at LADWP, but what observations do you have about how we make sure that our renewable power resources grow, despite the fact that they're very costly, as Ashkan has described?
Well, I certainly appreciate some of Ashkan's perspectives there, and I share the same view in terms of making sure that we look at where and what we're trying to achieve here. Because the lowest hanging fruit may not be in the stationary power side in terms of GHG emissions or even criteria pollutants. It actually may sit within the transportation side. So we obviously need to make progress in both areas, but we got to make sure that we allocate resources appropriately. Okay, and so part of my team's responsibility is to oversee the energy assets for the county facilities, and we're about to release the county's greenhouse gas emissions report in the next couple of weeks, looking back from our 2009 baseline to today. I'll preview to you all right now that we've seen over 40% reduction in greenhouse gas emissions, over that 14-year time span. So very dramatic.
Ben, if I could, that's from the county as an entity, right?
The county as an entity, scope 1, scope 2, and scope 3. Okay, emissions, and like I said, that'll come out in the next few weeks. We're finalizing it right now. But on the building side, which is where we consume energy, from the grid or natural gas, etc., we have seen almost a 50% reduction in GHG emissions. That's primarily due to our utilities. You mentioned earlier the county set up the Clean Power Alliance, which is a community choice aggregator. We are now purchasing 100% renewable energy from those accounts.
Wait a minute. Like, what's a community choice aggregator? Our audience may not know what that is.
It's basically a bulk buying, a power buyer. Okay, and they procure, energy for, and the utility that we utilize is Southern California Edison, and you're utilizing Edison's distribution network, and building systems, etc. But the CPA, the Clean Power Alliance, that was originally set up by LA County, is basically a bulk purchaser of power, and they're buying 100% renewable power for our accounts, and that has significantly reduced the county's internal greenhouse gas emissions, and so we made good progress. My team also used to operate cogeneration facilities. We shuttered those a few years ago in order to partly reduce our greenhouse gas emissions. But to that point, I want to kind of add on to what Ashkan was saying earlier, because this is a motto that I live by, which is don't let perfect be the enemy of the good. I know we have a vision for 100% renewable energy, right? And I've spent the bulk of my career working towards that. And, prior to this, I was at the federal government working on solar energy and integrating renewables to the grid. So I certainly understand those challenges. But I also say don't let perfect be the enemy of the good, because it's also, if you expand your problem horizon a little bit. So, for example, include transportation, which is a major emission source according to your charts, right, in California. And so, you don't want to necessarily, if you had $100 billion, for example, that Ashkan was saying is needed to convert LEDWP to 100% renewable energy, you may not actually want to spend all that $100 billion on achieving 100%, because that last increment, that last percent, is going to be very costly, right? And so you may want to consider shifting resources to transportation, for example, because that's where some of the big sources will be. And so that's what I was trying to, convey earlier, is that, we certainly need to make progress in all areas, but we also want to make those investments in areas that have the most impact per dollar spent.
Very good. So, Michelle, I want to come back to you here, because we hear from Ashkan and from Min that power is the sort of foundational, but ain't all of it. Some discussion about what the priority even might be. How do you see it, that those choices? And by the way, didn't you have an announcement to make as well about a report to come out?
Yeah, thanks, Denny. Maybe I'll just take a quick step back, since you had prompted me to explain what LACY is for folks who may not know.
Oh, yeah, right.
So just super quickly, we're a nonprofit organization with a mission to create an inclusive green economy in the greater LA region and beyond. And one of the things that we have focused on over the years is that we have a couple of signature public-private partnerships. One is our transportation electrification partnership. The other is our clean energy partnership, both of which include LA County and LADWP, as well as Southern California Edison, the Clean Power Alliance, and a number of other public agencies, as well as private sector companies that are really united by the idea that we need to move to both 100% zero emissions transportation and 100% clean energy as soon as possible. And we're, like many, aligning our efforts really right now all around 2028, using that forcing function of the world, putting its spotlight on LA for the Olympic and Paralympic Games as our forcing function. So a lot of my comments and my thinking really stem from those public-private partnerships and the priorities that we have aligned on. And certainly we need it all, right? We need all of these solutions that we're talking about today, and it is hard to make choices amongst them. I would maybe just encourage us not to think so much of renewable power and transportation as two entirely separate silos. I think more and more we're seeing that we need to focus attention and funding on some of those connective tissue solutions that can really help make sure that we are managing our power supply in a way that is most advantageous for ensuring that, utilities are able to keep the lights on, but that we are also charging our vehicles at appropriate times of the day, that we're building out the right amount of charging infrastructure for all of the vehicles. So I think it's really incumbent upon us to think about things like energy storage, how we are pairing energy storage with charging infrastructure for light, medium, and heavy-duty vehicles, the management software that can really make sure that we're powering at the right times of day, and things of that nature. So really would encourage us to think about that kind of nexus between transportation and energy as well.
Good.
And then
So,
your announcement, I can't remember what we talked about that I was announcing, but I did put into the chat, or Eli posted for me, that Lacey has just recently announced a LA Resilient Rebuilding Cup. So it will be a pitch competition on July 10th for innovators who have solutions to help us rebuild more resiliently after the fires. And that pitch competition will lead into selection for Lacey's next round of companies that we incubate through our work here. And so really encourage folks to apply or to spread the word about that if you have folks in your networks that you think might have great innovations.
so Michelle, I do have a sort of big picture question
Yeah.
that related. So we, earlier on the PowerPoint, we described that on both the power side and on the transportation side, light duty, heavy duty as well, that the basic technology, the solar, the wind, the EV car, and then the battery and fuel cell powered trucks, that those are foundational things that 10 years ago we didn't have, didn't exist, or at least didn't exist at all at the performance levels they do now. Do you agree then with that assessment, and that what we really have to focus investment on mostly is infrastructure, both to generate the power, to charge the vehicles, or to fuel them, that's the build strategy is really the right way to go?
Absolutely. Yeah, I think infrastructure is certainly time and again, what is identified as the largest sticking point, whether we're talking about light, medium, or heavy duty side of the equation. And it's not just building the infrastructure. I think, as many of us know, it's really about dedicating funding for infrastructure, appropriately siting that infrastructure, in places that make sense for the electricity grid, that make sense for travel patterns, that make sense for community input. There are locations, for instance, where communities would like to see depots for electrified heavy duty trucking, and there are places that communities do not want to see that be built. So really taking into consideration the strategic location of that charging infrastructure, and then working through what is, I think, one of the biggest challenges across the board on infrastructure deployment, which is the lengthy permitting and interconnection timelines. For folks who may not be intimately involved in this work, sometimes those timelines can be, upwards of 12 to 18 months, depending on how large of a site you're looking at. And so when we're talking about wanting to make a real impact over the next couple of years, those are some of the things that, not necessarily financially dependent, though certainly there are elements of that, but that I think, need to be addressed here in
They're
the
more on the cost side, right?
There is,
Reducing
I mean, I think there is a cost side in terms of staffing up and things like that for
Yeah.
the utilities and for the AHJs who are working on those topics. But that's something that I think is solvable here in the LA region that would help us get that infrastructure in place more quickly and more efficiently.
Very good. So Joel, I think I want to ask you that same question here. Do you think we're correct in our assessment that the vehicle technologies, light, medium, and heavy, battery or fuel cell, and that the solar, wind, blah, 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 that those foundational technologies, that's something we can regard as proven and available? They'll get better, they'll have to get better, they'll get cheaper, they have to get cheaper, but they are something we can now have confidence in, and that build, build, build the infrastructure should be the theme of our efforts.
Yes, before I do that, I want to sort of add on to what Michelle was saying about permitting, that permitting really is a challenge. You can, when I've talked to any of the charging station, the network operators that operate charging stations around the country, they could tell you stories that will make your hair turn green about how much more dramatically more expensive it is to build anything in California than anywhere else in the country, that it takes months and months longer, sometimes years longer to build any charging infrastructure, and that adds cost. It means that things cost more expensive here, which is which is kind of a shame, and it's not a good use of money. So whatever we could do to accelerate those timeframes means we'll have to spend less money on that infrastructure that we're sort of wasting money by making it so slow and painful to build anything here, as Michelle has kind of noted. So your question about whether it's about infrastructure versus vehicles, certainly for light duty, that's absolutely true. Battery technology has dramatically improved in the last. So the first, the current generation of EVs started to come out around 2011, 2012, and since that time, the cost of batteries has dropped by over 90%. So back in 2011, if you went and got a first generation Nissan Leaf, or one of the cars that were available then, typically the range was about 80 or 90 miles, and now new EVs come out and they're dramatically cheaper, and you can get 250, 300, 350 range. It's going up steadily with every new car that comes out, and they charge faster and they're more reliable. And so the vehicles have really changed a lot in the last decade, and they're continuing to change with new vehicles that come out. So certainly in terms of light duty vehicles, I would say that we're pretty good in terms of having a great selection of vehicles that meet people's needs. For pickup trucks and kind of medium duty vehicles, it's we're getting there. But having the battery technology improve so much has really improved things a lot. The challenge is charging, and it sort of depends on your use case. If you live in a single family home, charging is relatively straightforward. If you're, part of the county that rents or lives in multifamily housing, it's a lot more complex, and we don't want to leave 60% of the population behind if we're trying to get everybody into EVs.
But what about, Joe,
uh-huh.
what about, in your three priorities there of needs, you didn't mention what we might call a power station, i.e. replacement of a gas station, that there's a site where people can go. If we're able to charge more quickly now, it's not doesn't require overnight charging. We have fast charging, etc. What about the, some companies call it superchargers. Those, and I see them around Santa Monica now coming up, where we'll see a small parcel where the whole parcel is for public charging. You didn't mention that. Does that have a big role or a small role?
That's important. But I would say what you want to focus on is the charging that someone needs in order to be able to buy an EV. So the sort of what if I want to buy an EV, what do I need in terms of charging? And particularly in today's world, where you can buy an EV that gets 300 miles range, if you can charge at home, you're mostly going to be using public charging to go on road trips, not around town. So
Well,
if you
I
can,
see Men has something to say about this. Men?
Yeah, I want to echo what Joel said earlier around infrastructure around multifamily housing. And I want to share with you some data that we recently obtained that is certainly very concerning. We worked with an NGO to survey residents in disadvantaged communities who already started shifting towards electric vehicles. And obviously, we know it's already hard for people to make that initial leap from those who started with gasoline, to shift over to electric. But what we're finding is that about 25% of the respondents who already have, low-income residents who live in disadvantaged communities, who have already shifted to electric vehicles, they're thinking about giving that up, okay, and reverting, okay. And so I think what Joel was suggesting there is we need more infrastructure, especially in disadvantaged communities, in order to make sure that the transition is equitable, that people do have access to infrastructure.
Right, and
Yeah,
also
to follow.
so the emissions. I mean, we got to get everybody in it, right? Otherwise, the emissions don't go down enough.
Yes, that's right. And so the goal needs to be for people in multifamily that they have access to charging that's as inexpensive and convenient and reliable as charging in a single family house. And so while it's nice and it's useful to have DC fast chargers around, I think you don't want to be telling people in multifamily housing that they should go charge at a fast charger, that should be their core charging, because it's a lot more expensive. It's 2 to 3 times more expensive than charging at home. And it's for a road trip, it's not such a big deal. But if that's your core way that you charge every day, then basically you've got the people who are of the lowest means or the sort of moderate income people paying the most for charging. So with gasoline, everyone pays the same price for gasoline, but to have suddenly people who can least afford it paying the most for electricity, that's a bad situation. You don't want to go there. So it's good to have that public charging around, but it should be for people that are planning to take a longer drive or they need to top off. For day-to-day charging, you need to figure out a way that you can offer public charging that's either in buildings or convenient near their buildings that approaches the cost of at a single family home. It could be really low power. It could be a regular plug. Lots of people in single family homes just use a plug in their driveway. So that's a good solution for a lot of people. If you drive less than 40 miles a day, a regular 110 plug works fine if you have consistent, reliable access to it, and it's cheap, and utilities like it because it doesn't create extra pressure on the grid. So there's a lot of innovative things that you could do there. To have charging that starts to look like an alternative to gas stations, yeah, you want that. But I don't know that's going to be that's going to be for people going on a road trip or people driving a little bit farther. I don't think that's going to be like people's core charging that substitutes for being able to charge in your driveway. People who can charge in their driveway rarely go to public charging when they're at home. They do it when they're away from home.
So we're going to be getting near the end of our a lot of time here, and I think we want to give each of our speakers a sort of opportunity for some kind of closing observation, advice to Move LA, maybe, huh? We've passed around what we call our straw person, and what that really means is when we did other ballot measures before, like Measure M. But Measure N, we started with a straw person, which was just a preliminary view of what investment priorities might be and money distributed in which categories and blah, blah, blah. By the end of that process, we had the 53rd variation that we submitted to Metro as they were writing the actual plan. So in this case, if we go this route, it would probably be a voter initiative, and we would be directly involved with writing it. So the straw person is really, a kind of important thing, but it also guides our input toward cap and trade and the state budget, et cetera. So I really want to give each of you a last, before we close, an opportunity to really tell us, if you've had a chance to look at it closely, whether you think we've blown it, whether you think we got a good start but need to shift in some way. Is there a priority there that is missing or needs to be amped up or something. So Michelle, I'm going to go back to you and ask you to, maybe we could put the straw man person on the screen so everybody can see it. I mean, straw person basically means you're going to kick it around, right?
Yeah.
That's why
Well,
we call it straw. It's like it can handle being kicked around.
absolutely. Well, thank you again for convening this panel. I think we've covered a lot of ground in
Yeah.
a fairly short period of time. And I think, overall, I like the direction in which Move LA is going and really appreciate you all being creative, thinking early about, a range of solutions to incorporate as being funded by a potential ballot initiative, and also thinking about the variety of tools that we can put in place, including but not limited to a ballot initiative. So generally like the direction which you're all going. Of course, devil's in the details. As I've said, would love to see more of a call out for some of the enabling technologies between clean power and transportation electrification. But definitely appreciate the breadth of things that you are covering at this point in time, and look forward to continuing to weigh in as you develop.
Well, Michelle, on
solutions.
those things that you were just referring to, the enabling technologies, et cetera, I would invite you to send us an email so we can understand more clearly what you're suggesting.
Yeah,
And
happy to.
call you and get more detail from you about it.
Certainly. Happy to talk. We can come down the hall and talk to one another.
We'll wave as you pass. Because we at Move LA, we're at the LA Clean Tech Incubator Facility ourselves.
Which is
We're
owned
like-
by LADWP.
Right, and we're all like co-tenants here. All right, so Ashkan, I'd like to give you an opportunity for some overview closing advice about priorities here and what's missing, what are we overemphasizing, et cetera.
Yeah, thank you, Danny. So I mentioned that we do generation, transmission, and distribution. So this is a little small for me, and I can't really read all of them, but I can see accelerating renewable power. That is important, but also beefing up the distribution system so we can provide energy to Joel and Min and other developers that are trying to put charging infrastructure.
All right, so
These
you
are-
said distribution system. I want to understand exactly what you mean. Is that what we otherwise call transmission?
Great question. So historically, and now even more, we import power from far and different states. DWP currently import power from 6 different states. We use our transmission lines. These are long distance, 300, 400, 500 miles transmission lines to bring the energy to LA Basin. And then we have a distribution, and these are at very high voltage, 300, 400, 500,000 volts. Once it comes to the distribution system within the boundary of city of LA, that voltage drops to 34,000 volts, and then further down to 5,000 volts, and then to 110 and 220 to your house. So if you call it basically the last 3/4 of the road is distribution system, the last step is from the wire that you see in front of your house coming to your house. So that's part of the distribution system. And that's where we serve the load for the charging station, for the DC fast charge, for level 2, level 1, and all that infrastructure.
All right, so, but there are distributed power opportunities. Rooftop solar, for example, is probably the most prominent one, where transmission lines play less of a role. They do. I mean, we probably still need transmission lines, right? I mean, but given the apparent origins of the fires at the Palisades and Eaton, Altadena area, where it may have been transmission lines that were a part of the problem. What's the role of these distributed power systems? Are we trying to move away from transmission lines? Is it possible?
Danny, I think the best example would be using light duty vehicle instead of a big 18-wheel truck. The amount of energy that transmission line can import to the city, the order of magnitude is far more than the distributed energy resources. I think they're all going to be part of the solution, but there's not one solution that can basically take over and supply the load that we have currently and the load that we anticipate as we electrify different sectors of society.
So the 100 billion that you said would be needed for 100% renewable, how much of that cost is upgrading, remedying, or whatever, expanding the transmission system?
Probably about 10% or less.
Okay.
And that's because LA has a very extensive transmission system already. So we are trying to basically take advantage of the existing system we have and adding more capacity to that. So we are truly lucky to have this system. Another big portion of that is beefing up distribution system, making it ready to be able to serve the load. So historically, the highest peak load that we ever saw was about 6,500 megawatts. We anticipate by 2045, we approach over 10,000. So that's about 40% more. Our distribution system is not ready, and we need to get it ready to be able to serve that load. So that's a huge undertaking, is a huge lift.
So this is a build scenario.
This is a build times another 10 builds, yes, scenario, absolutely.
Well, thank God we got building people like the building trades who are around and skilled and ready to work on this stuff.
So to answer your first question, I think we should pay real attention to our distribution system, beefing that up, being able to serve the electrification for buildings, for transportation. We also probably see some data centers, in addition to hopefully unlocking other sectors, industrial and commercial sectors, to be using electricity instead of other source of energy. I give you an example. A hospital can basically use electric boiler instead of getting steam from their old, generating stations. So those are all going to be added electric loads that will come to us.
Okay, so Min, how about a closing assessment from you?
Oh gosh, I mean, there's a lot here. We covered a lot of ground. All these categories, I think you point out, are good areas for investments, and that would certainly help advance the region. But I also want to go back to one of the things I said earlier, that I say in different settings, in different meetings, is that ratepayers, taxpayers, and consumers are all the same people. We pay the electric or gas bill or gasoline bill. We pay the taxes. We also buy goods and services. So you have to think about all this in a broader ecosystem. Some of these things will drive inflation or taxes up. And so we got to be careful and be cognizant of what we're trying to achieve and how effective, we can do that. So that's just my perspective there, because, and I'm coming from the perspective, helping pay LA County's electric bill. When I joined the county about 7.5 years ago, the county's electric bill totaled somewhere around $83 million per year. Today, it'll be around $155 million per year. So that's just the county as a government that has 4,500 different buildings, right? We have a lot of facilities. The amount of electricity that we consumed, it really hasn't changed. Okay, those hospitals and those libraries, they also are operational. They use roughly the same amount of electricity. They've gotten a little bit better, but on a per square foot basis. But for the most part, we still use a lot of electricity, but our rates have gone up. Okay, and so you got to be careful about driving rates up or taxes up or other things up, because if you're a consumer, if you're a lower income individual, that almost doubling of your bills actually has a profound impact on your cost of living, right? And energy affordability. So be careful about that. But also, there were some comments that were in the chat that I really appreciated around permitting, right? And I think Vice Chair Pavley will, hopefully her report that's coming out this week will also talk about the permitting, the speed of permitting in the wake of the fires, because I think generically we can talk about, the challenges that people see. We have a solar project in the county that is taking probably 3 to 4 years longer than it should. And it's not the permitting itself, it's actually the interconnection, working with the utility, et cetera. So it's the bigger picture. And so we don't want to just focus on just the permit.
Thank you.
That
Thank
is-
you, man. Thank
is
you very much.
artificial.
I want to give Joel an opportunity to give some sort of wrap up on his view. Briefly though, Joe, okay? We're running out.
Okay, I'll try to keep it tight. But generally, I focus, I think about in addition to the sort of climate change benefits, the quality of life benefits of a lot of the things that you're talking about here, and how this can change what it feels like to live in LA. And when we're all driving around in cars and trucks that don't have a tailpipe, and you can see the mountains and you can breathe clean air. I mean, that's a valuable thing. And as
Well, you can hear the
more,
breeze.
then you can hear the breeze. Yeah, and you can hear the birds, that people are willing to pay for and people are excited about. One of the reasons people are hesitant to live in LA is because of the quality of air here. And so if you can address that, I think that's exciting to people. And also with active transportation, if you look at Washington, D.C. and New York and Paris and London and Vienna and Singapore, and great cities that have made huge investments in really pleasant streetscapes where you can get around by transit and walking and bicycling. And those are considered, wonderful cities with a high quality of life. And there's no reason that we can't have that here too. We've got, the layout of our city lends itself to that. And so to be able to invest in that kind of infrastructure, it improves quality of life and it makes it a more pleasant place to live. And it also, addresses air quality and climate. So these are a lot of win-win projects, I think, that we're talking about.
Thank you, listen, Joel. Thank you so much for your positive observations there. We're going to close up here. Let everybody have a moment to look at this, the screen here, and remind yourselves of our conference on May 16th at the Sheraton Grand. It starts at noon or 12:30, I guess. So you're going to be all going to be up awake. You're not going to, it's not a 7 o'clock in the morning thing. Because it's a Friday. We're going to try to get started at a reasonable time. And we'd love to have you attend. That will be about these very topics for a couple hours on a plenary panel, but also our work on the metro transportation system development and issues related to the state and federal government there as well, but also the affordable housing strategies that we've been behind, Measure ULA, Measure A in LA County, which is also part of our historic work that we are learning from and hoping to apply the lessons to this challenge as well. Thank you, everybody, for joining us. I see the list of attendees. See a lot of friends here. Good. Thanks for all for coming. See you at the Sheraton Grand on May 16th. Bye-bye.